Yeah. And when you watch The Devil Wears Prada, that is real. That is actually how it is working at CONDÉ NAST. Back in the 80s, they paid nicely. TV shows had money back then. $850 a day, $1,000 a day. When you're 17 years old, it's super cute. And I got some jobs that way, and I ended up working at CONDÉ NAST. Was an art director for International Vogue. I did Spanish Vogue, Russian Vogue, Greek Vogue. I did all the Vogues, and I did covers, I did editorials, I did the celebrity shoots. I was working like crazy. I was one of their most successful art directors. And we were like, yeah. And he said, he was like, how old are you guys? I was like, just about to turn 18, and we're trying to find an apartment. And out of the blue, he goes, oh, I own that building over there. And at 4 a.m, we went apartment hunting.
Sounds like New York. Influencer Insight shares the battles, stories, successes of models, influencers, and entrepreneurs as they find the balance of being influential leaders today while creating long-lasting impact for the future. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another session of Influencer Insights, where I have Ryan Colby on the podcast tonight. This is a special 50th episode that I have Ryan on, and Ryan's actually my contact in New York, so this is pretty cool to have him on and just talk about his background. He was a model back in the 90s, so some of his stories are kind of interesting about the things that have changed since then and now, and he's based out in New York, and sometimes he's in LA, depending where you need to run into him. But welcome, Ryan, and thanks for coming on tonight.
Hi, thanks, Ben. I started, my name is Ryan Colby. For any of you who don't know, I'm Ben's agent in New York City. And I started my career in 1984, and I started modeling in London in 1984. I got discovered by a photographer at a bakery store.
Wow.
And I started modeling pretty much immediately, within a couple of weeks of him finding me. And he turned out to be an actual well-known photographer. He wasn't just talking to kids in a bakery. And,
right. Were you baking in a bakery, or were you?
No, I was picking up donuts for my dance class.
Models, join us on Facebook in our group, where we've got all kinds of support and training you need to become a better model today. Check the link in the description.
I was at summer camp for dance.
Cool.
And I'm not from London. I'm from Canada, actually. I'm from St. Raymond, Canada. And every summer when I was like 9, 10, 11, 12, I would go to different dance camps in the United States and Europe. And that summer happened to be London. And I was studying abroad for the summer.
How did you get into that in the first place? Like, did your parents just
dance camp?
Yeah, Ryan likes to dance.
My mother put me in ballet when I was 3.
Oh, cool.
And I just happened to be good at it. And I excelled really fast. I became one of their top dancers by the time I was like 8.
Nice.
And I was doing all the big operas, the Nutcracker. I was doing all the big, ballet performances. And
yeah.
I was doing well with that. So every year they would send a few of their promising students to these camps where you would learn different methods from different top ballet schools.
Yep.
Yeah. So that summer I happened to be in London, and I was picking up donuts for our class because we kind of rotate. Like, one day someone gets snacks, one day someone gets snacks. That day it was my day. And some guy, his name is Olivier Toscani, he happened to be in the bakery as well. And he asked me if I was a model. And I said, no, I'm a dancer. I go to that school. I pointed across the street.
Yeah.
The school was across the street. And he said, oh, you should model as well. And I was like, I knew models. I knew a few models. My mother's in the makeup industry. So
right.
I knew what models did, but
never thought of doing it, probably.
It never even dawned on me to even think about it.
Yeah.
I was really focused on dancing.
Sure.
And I wrote my mother's number, which is a foreign number because she was in Canada,
right,
on a napkin, thinking he's never going to call her. And a couple of days later, my mother called the dorm that the dancers stay in.
Right.
And back then we had landlines,
right.
And she called. It was 1984.
Yeah.
Landlines. She called and she was like, who is this guy calling the house? Like, you gave my number to who? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And I said, it's something. And she talked to him and looked him up, and he was real. So 3 weeks later, after meeting him, I was in Rome shooting a job with him. And he happened to co-own the United Colors of Benetton. And he happened to be the photographer for the United Colors of Benetton.
Wow.
And that launched my career. I did their ad campaign, and it was one of the first ones they did. And it was extremely successful. And I ended up getting representation in London.
Wow.
And I moved there right after coming back home after dance camp, was home for a month or two. And then when the ad came out, the agencies in London were fighting on who was going to get me because it was a very successful ad.
Good place
And
to be.
I ended up like physically moving there, like moving.
Wow.
And with
And
a
you were
chaperone.
how old at that point moving there?
I was 12.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. I moved with a chaperone. My mother couldn't come because I have siblings.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a young son. My mother had just given birth. I think my sister was 1. And I have a brother, and I had another sister who was like 5. So she couldn't do the whole family, but she had a girlfriend who never had kids and who was kind of like our de facto aunt. Even though I had an aunt, I have an identical twin aunt, my mother, and which, was sometimes confusing. But anyway, she came with me to see if this was going to work, and she agreed to stay for 6 months, and we lived in an apartment together. And then 6 months turned into, I really like it here. I switched schools. I ended up going to a school in London that specialized in kids with careers. It's called the Professional Children's School. And I ended up loving it. So every 6 months was kind of like a trial. And eventually I stayed there until I was like 16, almost, 16 and a half. And I worked, I did all the shows. I went to Milan, I went to Paris. I started doing the shows when I was like 15. Between like 12 and 15, I was kind of just doing like TV commercials, kids stuff, child modeling. But when I was like around 15, they were like, you're good enough to do men's shows. And this is the 80s, so there were kind of no rules back then when it came to modeling. Now you have legal rules and you can't do this and you can't do that. But back then it was kind of a free-for-all. I went to Milan and failed. My first season in Milan, I did nothing. I got 0 shows. I think I got 1 or 2 in Paris and some in London. But the following season, when I was like 16, I hit big. So because I had shot a bunch of jobs that came out in that interim of time between seasons, and I did like 20 shows in Milan. I did like Manuel Ungaro, Comme des Garçons, all the big ones. So that jump-started me into the adult world of doing, men's modeling. So I started doing bigger magazines and stuff like that. And then my agency decided when I was like 17, they were like, oh, you should go to New York because that's the mecca. I'd been to New York for jobs for like a day or two, but I never stepped foot for more than a day or two. So they were like, you should go there for a season or 2 and see if you like it. And so I did. And I've been here ever since.
The rest is history. That's pretty cool. And what kind of experience to, just not everybody gets that opportunity so young to get into that and get going on it. So when you got back to New York, did you kind of continue the modeling for quite a few years after that, or did you?
Oh yeah, no, I was the first 6 months here when I moved here wasn't super cute because even though you're a darling in another market, like I was kind of like one of the only Black boys working in the 80s in London. Nobody cared over here. So you kind of have to prove yourself again. And I didn't know that. I thought, oh, I'm doing everything in London. I'm doing every TV commercial. I'm doing every fashion show. I'm going to be like, a star. And that did not quite happen. It was very clear from the beginning. Nobody cared what I did overseas. I mean, a little bit, but not enough to make me into this thing that I thought I was going to be. So there was like 5 or 6 months, I didn't make $1. I luckily had savings because I did well overseas. So I didn't just come here with like $15. I came here with money, but this is New York. And even though New York is expensive now, it always has been. So people think New York just got expensive in the past couple of years. It's always been this way. That savings was going. So by month 6, I think I had like 2 months left. And I was like, okay, well, this didn't work. I'm just going to go back to London where I'm appreciated and move on with my life. and then I was at a party and this producer, a television producer, liked me and said, "Oh, you should do daytime. You should do television. You should do that." And I was like, "I've never done television. I've done TV commercials, but I've never done television."
Yeah.
And day-to-day television, that's never happened. So he suggested I do it. He called my agency. I told him I was with Wilhelmina. At the time, I was with Wilhelmina. And they set up a meeting, and I went, and then I started doing jobs for him at ABC daytime, doing day player work on soap. And that gave me money because back in the 80s, they paid nicely. TV shows had money back then. It was, $850 a day, $1,000 a day. And when you're 17 years old, it's super cute. So I started doing that, and that kept me in New York because I was ready to leave because I only had like a month or two savings left. But that kept me in New York. So I was like, okay, well, now I can get an apartment because at the time I was staying in the model apartment for Wilhelmina, which was in Times Square. It's not cute. It was very small, very crowded. And I made a friend who wasn't even with my agency. He was with Click, but we saw each other all on the streets and stuff like that, and we became really good friends. So he was staying in the Click model apartment. I was staying in the Wilhelmina model apartment. And he was like, let's get our own apartment because he started to make money. I started to make money. So I was like, okay. So our first apartment was on 14th and 8th Avenue, 14th between 7th and 8th Avenue. And we rented it from a musician who owned the building. He happened to be Sting and Sheryl Crow's producer. But he also owned a building on 14th and 8th. And we met him at like 4 o'clock in the morning coming out of a nightclub that we shouldn't have been in, but we were. And this was the late 80s. And he came up to it. He's like, oh, you guys are beautiful. You guys are models. And we were like, yeah. And he said, he was like, how old are you guys? I was like just about to turn 18 and Bobby was 18. And he was like, he's like, we live in the model apartments. We're trying to find an apartment. And out of the blue, he goes, oh, I own that building over there. And he's like, I have a couple empty apartments in there. You should take a look. And at 4 a.m, we went apartment hunting. And
sounds like New York.
After a couple of drinks at this nightclub called Plum that was on 14th Street. And we went and looked at these apartments and we're like, look, we're young. Like nobody wanted to give us an apartment because we were underage. And even though we were models and we had an okay career in New York, modeling isn't really considered a job because you don't really get paychecks. Like it's not like
9 to 5.
You work at like, an office building or somewhere where you get a paycheck every week, and it doesn't work that way. So when you're talking to landlords, especially at 17 years old, saying, oh, we want to rent this apartment, they're like, you need to get out of here. So
go get a job first. Yeah.
It was really hard. I know, exactly. Even though technically we were probably making more money than the person we were talking to.
For sure, yeah.
They didn't see it that way.
No.
So he gave it to us. He's like, on one condition, he had a cat and he toured a lot with Sting and Sheryl Crow and Eric Clapton, like he was producing their stuff. So he's like, I'm gone a lot. You got to watch my cat when I'm gone.
Fair trade.
We're like, okay. So he gave us this 1-bedroom apartment that was on the same floor as him. And we moved in within days. And we lived there for like 2.5 years. So that was like my first apartment.
Wow.
Like my apartment, not the model apartment.
Yeah.
And that kept me in New York. And that was my beginnings here in New York City. And I did daytime work. I worked on One Life to Live, and I did Guiding Light. I did different daytime work. And that kept me in New York because it paid really nicely and you got paid every week. And
right.
So, yeah.
So TV, modeling, everything kind of. And you're not even 20 years old at this point yet, right? So that's pretty crazy.
I was like 18 when I was doing all that daytime stuff. And that I got the apartment, and I did that for a while, and I still modeled. Once I got the daytime job, and I was doing One Life to Live. Yeah, I was booking shoots too because I felt more confident, and I was like, oh, I'm here to stay. Right. And so I actually started getting some jobs too because I wasn't shooting daytime every single day, 7 days a week. It was like 2 days, 3 days a week. It depended upon the storyline. So sometimes I was working a lot, sometimes I was working a little, but I had a fair amount of time to do shoots.
To work on your own stuff. So, wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, no, it's kind of amazing those connections that a person will make in that city, right? There's people that I ran across.
I was at a Christmas party when I met him. His name was Paul Roche. He has since passed. Okay. But he was a very famous producer at ABC, and he would ride his bike to work, and he was a very rich man, but he didn't have a car, and he dressed in jeans and t-shirts, and he would drive his bike back and forth from the ABC building to his penthouse, and he was a very nice man, and he gave me my shot here because if it wasn't for him, I would have gone back.
Sure.
Within
What
a
else would
month
you
or
have done?
so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Beginnings for everybody are always kind of an interesting thing. You never know what path people get and where they like to take it. But moving, I guess, down the timeline a little bit, when did you and how did you kind of make that transition to, working in the industry to do managing and agency?
Okay. Yeah. So I got married when I was 21. I met someone and we ended up becoming married, and I was with him for a decade.
Cool.
And while I was with him, as I got older, like 25, 26, 27, I started getting tired of being a model and being in front of the camera because
Yes.
the 90s were here. It was just, I don't know, I just wasn't into it anymore.
Yep.
And he suggested that I quit and take a year off and see what I wanted to do. Mind you, I didn't go to college. I didn't, have the traditional
Busy at that point in life.
resume where I could be like, oh, I'm just gonna go, redo my resume. And like,
Yeah.
models don't have resumes. It doesn't work that way.
No.
So, your resume is what you look like. Like, there's no like,
Yeah. Right.
there's no printed resume. Anyway, so when I was like 27, after modeling for 15 years straight, I quit. I stopped and I took a year off, and I just attended to him. And he had he worked for the White House at the time. He worked for the Clintons.
Oh, cool.
And he was a scientist, and I helped him with some of his projects. I was kind of like his assistant. I learned something new. He was also a part-time visiting teacher at MIT. So he would sometimes go there and give lectures. So I would organize his folders and papers, and I changed my life completely for a year, where I became like a de facto housewife, and I just followed him around while he did his thing because I wasn't working.
Right.
And that lasted for like a year, and then I got tired of that because I'm not a science person. I didn't fit in that world, and I was just doing it to deflate from 15 years being in an industry that
For sure
only values your looks and stuff like that. So it was nice to not care about what I looked like.
Yeah.
So
not worry about it. Yeah.
But then I got back into the art part of the industry. So I decided, I like art direction. I like, I know it looks good on a page.
Right.
I know how things need to be shot. I don't need to be a photographer to do that. I can be an art director.
Yep.
So I applied to a bunch of different magazines, and I got some jobs that way. And I ended up working at CONDÉ NAST for the next 3 years.
Cool.
Where I was an art director for International Vogue. I did Spanish Vogue, Russian Vogue, Greek Vogue. I did all the Vogues, and I did covers. I did editorials. I did the celebrity shoots. I was working like crazy. I was one of their most successful art directors. And I also worked for other magazines at the same time because I didn't have a contract with them. So I worked for Interview Magazine. I worked for Surface Magazine. I worked for Euroman, Eurowoman out of Europe. I did GQ. I did so many things. I also did TV commercials. I art directed Heineken, Federal Express, different commercials. I did catalogs. I did Macy's. I did Victoria's Secret. Like, I was art directing my ass off for like a 3-year period.
Yep.
Running myself ragged. It was actually much harder than being a model. There were days I missed being a model because I was like, this sucks. But I asked for it, and so I was, going to follow through.
Do you mind if I ask what art directing looked like? Because, now we use Canva and all these cool apps online and stuff.
Art direction is live. Canva is there for like touch-ups and stuff. I'm talking about live art direction, meaning, the person's in a red dress. I want it shot from this angle. I want it cropped at the waist. I want it cropped at the ankle.
Right.
I want wind blowing. I want the light hitting from the left. I want whatever comes out of my mouth. I want,
that's a big job though, to see that and put that out there for people.
That's what I did for 3 years. Which is a big publishing house. They publish a ton of magazines.
Right.
And I was kind of just bounced around wherever they needed me. I was kind of just filler.
Yep.
And And when you watch The Devil Wears Prada, that shit is real. Oh, sorry. That is real. That is actually how it is working at Condé Nast. It's pretty spot on.
Right.
Obviously, it's inflated a teensy bit because it's a movie, but
Yes. Yeah.
it's 80%.
That right? Pretty cutthroat kind of work, eh? Yeah.
It's 80% accurate.
Wow.
That's pretty much what happens when you work at a mag.
Wow.
So, I loved it. I mean, even though it was really, 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 really hard, and I was never so tired. I did Fashion Week in Paris and Milan. I was never tired.
Like
But
that.
working at Condé Nast, I was exhausted 7 days a week. It was a challenging time, but
Right.
I loved it. I learned a lot, and I made a name for myself doing that. I mean, people still to this day, I'm 52 years old. People still think I work at Condé Nast.
Is that right, eh?
Because my name is discussed in the hallways at any given moment sometimes. So
That's
people
pretty
think,
cool.
oh, is he like a visiting editor? And it's like, no, I haven't worked there since I was like 31 or something.
Right. It's been like
I haven't worked there in
20 years.
But unfortunately, because I did well and people still talk about me, there are times people still think I'm like employed there.
Right. Well, that's a good thing. It's, I mean, not to say that you need to go back to that, but there's always those opportunities, right? If you got those names out. So
yeah.
So where did the shift take place after doing the magazine?
After that, okay. So when I was working at Condé Nast, what a lot of people don't know is that when you work at a big magazine like Vogue or Elle or when you work at a huge magazine, a lot of times designers or product will ask the magazine privately to help them with their advertising, because sometimes they want to know what looks good in their magazine. So a lot of people don't know this, but this is regularly happens to this day. It still happens, but especially back in the 90s. So some products will come to me like Samsonite. I did Samsonite advertising. I did advertising for Doc Martin. They would come to me and be like, hey, we want to be in the pages of Vogue. But what you also don't know is that we can deny your ad. So if you supply us artwork saying, hey, here's our ad for the September issue or the March issue or whatever issue, and we don't like it and it doesn't fit in with the Vogue narrative, we can be like, no, come back with better artwork.
Wow.
So that happens regularly. So they will come to us and be like, well, can you help us? Can you make it look like something that you would use in your magazine? Yeah. And so they would assign an art director to this designer, that designer, this designer, whoever. Yeah. And you would redo their ad. And so when I would redo their ads, I would also take charge of everything. I'd get the photographer, I'd hire the model, I'd book a studio, whatever had to be done, hair, makeup, whatever. Yeah. I took over the whole thing. So that's kind of how it started, because when I was booking models, sometimes the client would ask me to scout and find models. Like I remember when I was doing Federal Express, they didn't need models. They just needed interesting faces. Right. So I had to scout. I was standing on the street corners with my Polaroid camera, taking pictures of random people and getting their names and numbers and praying that they would actually answer. This, back then.
No texting.
To put them in TV commercials. So it kind of started my scouting, where I would find faces on the street and put them in jobs. And the clincher was this one boy I found who was 14 years old, and I was scouting for Macy's, and we were doing a whole maybe it was Christmas or Valentine's Day, something, and we needed groups of teen boys and girls. And I found this boy in the Sharper Image store on 57th Street. And I was in that store, and he came in with his dad, and he was gangly and weird looking, and I just thought he was really interesting. I talked to his dad. His dad said yes, as long as it doesn't interfere with school. Luckily, he was from Brooklyn. He was from New York, so it was easy. And we put him in the Macy's thing. What I didn't know was behind the scenes is that someone saw him on set from NEC management, swooped him up, and I'm walking down the street like 3 months later,
looking for somebody else.
I see a huge Tommy Hilfiger billboard.
Wow.
And the boy that I found. So I'm like, excuse me? What is that?
Yeah.
What is going on here?
Wow.
So it kind of had a light bulb in my head. Like, if I found that boy and now he's doing billboards, I can do this 7 days a week. Yeah. So that's what started it. Okay. Because they took him, and he wasn't mine to not take. Right. I was just stunned that I didn't even know about it. Right. And so I kind of was like, if I can find boys like that, then I can do that all day. Yeah. So I started slowly doing that. Wow. And then it just morphed into becoming an agent. That's was a slow burn. It took like a year, and then I just had a bunch of guys that were amazing looking. And then clients came to me and said, we like that guy for this shoot. That guy for this shoot. And I just became an agent. Sure. And I started doing it that way. But I didn't have my own agency. So it was kind of like, how am I booking these people?
Right.
So I started giving them. I didn't have a business license. I had nothing. So I started giving them away for a fee, obviously.
Sure.
2 different agencies. And then I got a job at Elite, and I was grooming the girls at Elite for the Look of the Year contest, which it's a 90s, 80s, 90s thing. I don't know if they still do it, but back then, the Look of the Year, and it was every year. And I would groom the girls, runway walk, hair, makeup, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And so I did that for them for a bit. And then I got a junior booking job at IMG, where I started learning how to book jobs. Because what you don't know is that even being a model for 15 years, I had no idea how my agent got the job. Right. I just knew they sent me a piece of paper saying you're working on Tuesday.
Go here.
I had no idea how they did it.
Wow.
So I had to sit and physically learn how you talk to clients on the phone, how you negotiate rates, how you do this, how you do that, how you do everything. And that's what I learned at IMG. So I did that for 3 years, and I ran the new faces for men's division, and I discovered a bunch of mega stars. Actually, some of them are still working today. They're in their 50s, and they're still shooting, and they're still working. Yeah. So I did that. And once I was doing that, then I was like, I can do this by myself. And that's when I opened the agency in 2010.
Okay.
And been 15 years almost.
Stress-free 15 years, right? Yeah.
No, it's very hard. I mean, when you're working at IMG, you have backers, there's money, there's a staff of pretty much between the men's and the women's division. There's and the sports division, there's 75 people.
Is that right?
100 people working there at any given moment.
So is it like when you're making
accounting, lawyers, the sports division, which was huge. They represent the Williams sisters. They represent Pete Sampras and Michael Phelps, and there is a huge sports division. Then you have the women's division, and you have the men's division. There's 100 people there.
Right. So do you also sit in a cubicle there when you're there, and everybody picks up the phone? And calls,
it's not a cubicle. It's like a massive, massive, massive round table.
Really interesting. Well,
yeah, there's no cubicles.
Okay.
Yeah. So, well, at least not. There are no cubicles in any agency that I mean, nobody does that. You need to be you need to be able to see their computer. They need to see yours. You need to lean over. You can't do that with a cubicle.
Gotcha.
So anyway, you have a lot of support. If there's an issue with accounting, you go upstairs and you talk to Jennifer. You get an accountant. You have an issue with this, you go talk to this. When you own your own business, you're doing all of that by yourself.
Who do you talk to? Yeah.
You talk to nobody. So, so I had to make that transition, which was really difficult. Mm-hmm. And it still is difficult, but I prefer it because I do what I want when I want, and I don't answer to anyone. And I just prefer it that way.
Sure.
I may not make as much money as I was when I was working at IMG, but it's mine. It has my name.
Yep.
And
the freedom in that too, right?
It's mine, and I don't have to deal with a board of directors. I don't have to go to weird meetings.
Is the agency kind of at the size you want it to be, or would you like to see it go bigger yet? Or
no, I played that game in the beginning. When the first 2 years I opened, I had 150 people. I was big, and it was like a living nightmare. I was pretty much crying every other hour. It was very stressful. I was having stomach issues. I had an ulcer. I think I had an ulcer. It was never diagnosed, but something was going on in my abdomen from the stress.
Yes.
And I did that. I played that game for 2 years just to get my name on the map.
Yeah.
And it wasn't working because I was sick all the time, physically sick.
Right.
So I was like, okay, this isn't fun.
Yeah.
So I started getting rid of people slowly, and now I'm at 70 something.
Wow.
And I can manage that alone. And I haven't.
What's some of the, coolest jobs that you've been able to book, or places you've been able to send people?
I send a lot. I don't do it much anymore, but I used to send a lot of people to India.
Oh,
and
cool.
they really like that. I used to work with a lot of the Indian agencies, so I sent a lot of people to India.
Yep.
China, I still work with very well. I have a boy in China right now, one boy. Korea, China, Japan. I like sending people abroad. Mm-hmm. It's fun.
Mm-hmm.
As far as jobs, recently I have two boys on a new hit daytime show coming out in February called The Gates.
The Gates,
So
cool.
I have two actors on that, and
Is
they've
that
been filming
ABC or
regularly. CBS.
CBS, that show? Okay.
It comes out in February. I have a guy on Young and the Restless. I booked a Tesla commercial in Sydney,
Cool.
Australia.
Yeah.
I don't know, lots of cool stuff.
Nice. No, that's
There's
awesome.
cool
Yeah.
stuff every week. There's always a highlight a week, and it's
Right.
52 weeks a year.
Yeah. Gets to be pretty exciting after 10 or 15 years, right? So
Yeah.
cool. People that want to get into modeling, having your experience and being in it now, what are some things that they should be aiming for or planning on getting them set up when they're getting into modeling?
Now, they got to be communicative. I'm not a fan of slow responders. You know,
Sure.
if someone asks for selfies and digitals, I need them the day I've asked. You know, this is 2025, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to get your digital camera and do all it. Like the apparatus that you texted me back on, use that and send me selfies. Like it's
shoot it over there.
So I'm not a fan of waiting for things.
Sure.
It turns me off and it makes me think you're probably going to slack on other things. And so therefore it's a turnoff.
Yeah.
You know, if you can't do the simplest of actions, how are you going to do the hard ones?
That's right.
So I'm not into that. What do I suggest? I suggest that people start, understanding that you have to come to the major markets. You know, you can't stay, you can live in your city, but you need to make regular visits to Los Angeles, New York, wherever physically fits you best.
Yep.
As far as your look. You can't just sit in Kansas or wherever, or even where you live in Vancouver. You can't.
Yep.
You have to be able to come to these markets regularly to get your feet wet and start immersing yourself into that market if you want to be a competitive model.
Right.
But there are some people that are perfectly fine and happy staying in Minneapolis and doing a modeling job once a year, twice a year.
Yep.
And if that's you, then that's fair. I can't judge. But if you want to be a real model and do real juicy things, you must be able to travel and go away for a week or two or three at a time.
Yep.
And that needs to be done regularly, not just once. It needs to be done a couple times a year.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. No, those are good points.
Somebody that's don't realize that. I get a lot of emails from people in Kansas and all these towns, and they're like, I want to be a model. And I'm like, okay, great. You have a good look. You need to come to New York for Fashion Week, or you need to come to New York this summer for a month or two. Oh, I can't come to New York for a month.
Right.
Well, how are you going to model?
Right.
I'd love to know how you're going to do this.
Yes. Yeah.
Because you're not going to. So, good luck.
Commit or don't commit, eh? So,
So.
No, that's fair for sure. If somebody's out of the blue and like, what are some characteristics that they should have if they were going to work with somebody like you? Is there some physical aspects and stuff like that they should have?
No. I like what I like. My tastes have morphed over the years. I don't have a look. Whatever is interesting to my eye. Yeah, that's what I like. And sometimes I don't even 100% need to like the person. I just know that the public will. Because at the end of the day, I'm a salesman. Like, I'm selling the face and the look to the public. I don't have to love it because I'm not consuming it. Yeah. So the public is, meaning clients and the real public. So therefore, there are guys that I have that I know the public will like them. I don't particularly love, but that's okay. I don't need to. I don't need to love it.
I don't like you, but I
don't need to love 70 people.
Yeah, for sure.
I really just don't. I need to like you enough to sell you. Yeah. And that's it. So there is no type, because there are types out there in the market right now that I'm not really into, but I got to have one or two because that's what sells. Yeah. It doesn't mean I have to like it because I'm an agent. I'm not the barometer of what's in. Right. That's not my job. Yeah.
You know it works and stick with that, or
I know it works and it doesn't need to be to my liking. It's not, we're not saving lives here. This is just modeling. It's not, no one's life is being saved.
Fair enough.
It's fairly superficial at the end of the day.
Yeah, at the end of the day, no, that's good. What about caution? Like things that people should be aware of when they're maybe diving into the industry, or if they're going to go fly to New York or LA, like what are things that they should be looking for?
If they're doing it alone without agency assistance,
Yes.
That is risky because there are too many cautions. We don't have the time to go over it.
Yeah, I suppose.
It's never ending,
Yeah.
actually. There's so many of these weird fashion shows that think that they're a part of Fashion Week and they're not. And there's so many of these weird modeling schools, and the list goes on. And if you're alone, they know that you're alone. You're an easy target because there's not a third person that's going to interject and be like, "Oh, what are you doing?
Right.
What's this?"
Right.
That's me. That I don't allow any of my guys to do anything without it being vetted through me. So therefore, there's very little to slim to zero chance of anything happening because I'm like a detective. I don't let these clients or anyone.
And you've seen
weird.
Some of the people before that, were sketchy or whatever, right? Like you kind of know that experience.
Yeah, I already know who's playing games here in New York, so I can just eliminate them from the equation. But there's always a new one. There's always a new one.
Is that right, eh? Just scammers everywhere.
So yeah, if you're doing it alone, I can't even really tell you what to look out for because to me, it's evident, like kind of like seeing a rock on the street. But to you, you're going to fall for it because you're so desperate. Sometimes the people are so desperate for acceptance and desperate to be in this industry that they'll do anything. So therefore, I'd work harder at finding representation before I'd work harder at getting on a plane.
Fair enough.
One has to happen first. And sometimes people do things ass backwards. Now, if your goal is to come to New York or LA or whatever and run around to the agencies and see agencies, I guess you can do that.
Right.
Sorry. You can do that, but it's going to take a while. It's going to take a while.
I was going to say, is that something that would work? Like, it's pretty.
If you've got it, yes, it works.
Okay.
But it's just going to take a while.
Yeah, for sure.
You can't plan a long weekend and expect that to happen.
Thanksgiving long weekend.
A month. You have to be here for like a month or two.
Yeah, just commit that time. What should people look out for when they're trying to find an agent? There's fellows like you that.
It depends on your personality. Some people like big box things,
right?
They like the big box experience, and those agencies are amazing. ING and Ford, they're amazing. Mm-hmm. But you're not going to get attention. Half the time, they're not going to know your name.
Right.
They may know your first name, possibly.
Maybe.
When I worked at ING, there were days, I'm not joking, boys would call, I'd pick up the phone, landline times, and be like, "Oh, this is David. I'm coming into New York for a couple of weeks." And I'm like, "Who?" And I'm like, "I've never seen you. I've never heard of you. Who are you?"
Yeah.
And they'd say their name. And I'd have to turn around and look at the board and be like, "Oh, tick. I've never seen you before in my life."
Right.
Because there's 300 boys at this agency.
Yes.
350 sometimes back then.
Yeah.
And I don't know who you are. I don't know all of them. I know 40, 50, 60 of them. The rest I'm like, I've never seen you before in my life. Welcome.
Yeah.
I don't know where you came from. So sometimes that happens where you're just a thing on the wall. And if you get a job, great. If you don't, great also. There's no concern about your future for the next 6 months, a year.
Right.
When you're with a boutique agency like me, or there's others, there's the society, there's several agencies that only have like 40, 50, 60 people.
Yep.
You can have the one-on-ones, you can have the lunches and the dinners and the chit-chats and the talking and because there's time. There's time.
Yeah.
And unless you're one of the top 10 earners at ING or Ford, they don't care what your last name is.
For sure.
Or they really don't. It's not that they're being mean, but they've got to pay attention to those 10.
Yeah, right.
They're the ones keeping the lights on.
That's right. Yeah, that's only fair. It's business.
So until you become one of those 10 or 20 that are keeping the lights on,
you're nobody.
You're just a boy.
Yeah.
Or a girl. It's actually worse for the girls. So
yeah, a lot more competition.
Much worse for the girls because there's more girls getting into this industry. So if ING has 300 guys, they have way more girls, and their features are similar, and they start to blend together. And if you're the one that's popping off, the other 5 that look like you, good luck.
Yeah. See you later, eh? So
see you later. You should have been with a boutique agency that was paying attention to you.
There you go.
A lot of people make that mistake. They get all excited. It's like, oh my God. It's kind of like going to a high-end store. Like, oh my God, I want that Prada shirt.
Right.
But the same shirt at Target for $5 and this is $150. It's the same cotton. It's the same shirt, but they want the Prada one.
Yes.
Even though there's no difference.
Right.
So if people are like that, you better be one of the top 20. Otherwise, you're going to suffer.
You're not going to make her.
Yeah.
I know this is just because our personal conversations have gone there, but if somebody gets signed with somebody like yourself or another boutique agency and they fly to New York, what are some things? How should they behave?
How should they behave?
Yeah, like what are some good practices of working with you?
I like boys that are compliant and look and learn. Yeah. I'm not into chatterboxes. I'm not into jazz hands. I'm not into crazies who want to party.
Yeah.
I like simple, compliant people that are taking in the city and learning and deducing if this is for them.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people will come here and be like, I thought I wanted to do this, but I don't.
Right.
Because this life is crazy. New York is crazy.
Totally.
And not everyone can hang.
Yes.
So I need you to pay attention. So that's kind of the only thing I require is like,
cool. Just
pay attention.
Yeah.
If you have any questions, ask me. Yeah. But don't come here thinking that you're on vacation in Ibiza and you're just going to run around like a chicken and be a weirdo. Because if I smell that that's what you're here for, then, the trip is over and you're going home.
Yeah, fair enough. No, it was a pretty reasonable requirement as far as I'm concerned. And,
yeah, because a lot of people do come here and they think they're on vacation. They think this is a playground.
Holiday.
And it's not a playground. This is a very serious city.
Yes. Yep. Got to work. Yeah.
If you don't pay attention, you're just going to be eaten up and thrown away.
Right. No, absolutely. And I definitely found that myself when I was there. It was a lot about just plugging away at it. So,
it's very difficult. I mean, how did you like you were here for what, 10 days or 12 days?
Yeah. No, it was a fun experience. I was so glad to see, I caught a few of the touristy things that you would do in New York, but it was a whole different experience getting to walk the streets and go to the different places across town that you just wouldn't go for any reason other than doing work. And that was, really cool experience. So,
yeah, I mean, there's always room for touristy things and to have fun for a minute. Yeah. I'm not stupid. Humans are humans. They're going to be curious and want to see things, but that can't be the focus is basically what I mean. And sometimes I've had it happen where, it is the focus. Yeah. And I'm like, I've had boys come here and they leave at like 7 a.m. and I can't find you until midnight because you've been running around like a chicken being weird.
Yeah. Do your job.
That's what I mean.
No, for sure. Any I guess being in the industry, going through the things that you've done, is there some, mental exercises that you do or some focus things that you do to kind of stay up on the mindset of working with people and growing the agency?
Yeah, I mean, this is a mentally draining life. There are moments I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, what the hell was I thinking? But
why am I here?
At the end of the day, I do love this industry.
Yeah.
So for every day that pops up, a couple times a year where I'm like hating everybody.
Yes. Yeah.
I realize I'm very lucky. This is the only job I've ever had since I was 12.
Yeah.
Is this industry? I mean,
yeah.
I've never worked at the mall. I've never worked at a restaurant. I've never worked in an office building, like the traditional sense.
Yes.
I've never had to do those things. And that's because of my love of the industry. I've always persevered. For those isolated days when I'm like hating everybody and wish I worked at Target or wish I worked at the mall. It's very fleeting. It lasts for an hour or two. Or three. And then I wake up and realize, that would actually be more of a nightmare.
I want to be there. Yeah.
And because I'm not a people pleaser or a people person. Yeah. So if I did work at Target, I for sure would be fired within days.
No problem.
All it would take was one person to say the wrong thing to me.
Yeah.
About where are the sneakers, and they gave me a snarky answer.
Think that showed up here.
It's on and popping, and I'm fired.
Yeah.
So that kind of job wouldn't work for me.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
So I'm good by myself. But there are days where mentally it's like, I just need a moment. And the lucky thing is that I own my own thing. So therefore, if I'm like, you know what, I am done speaking to everyone today, that's exactly what I do.
Right.
I just turn my phone off or don't answer it and move on with whatever I'm doing and ignore until I feel better.
Nice.
And they're really short spurts. I'm not that kind of person that lulls and like days go by and I can't function. Like it's just an hour or two where I'm like just annoyed, just leave me alone for 2-3 hours and I'll be back to my normal self.
Peace and quiet and away we go. Yeah. Well, that's probably some experience over time. You've developed that skill set too.
I developed that skill set because when you're in it, like especially when you're in front of the camera, you don't have time. The whole production is depending upon you monetarily wise. You don't have time for breakdowns.
No, that's right.
So I've learned, like, just get it together. You can cry tomorrow.
Yeah. It's another day to cry. Yeah. There you go. Cool. How do people follow you and get a hold of you, Ryan?
I have Instagram, which is at Colby Management, one word.
Yeah.
And that's really all I use. I mean, I have a Twitter, but I'm on it once a month. And I have a Facebook, Ryan Colby. Again, I'm on that once a month. I'm not as big into social media as I should be. I really don't 100% care for it. Sure. I realize it's a tool that people use and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But it doesn't drive me. So I'm not like trying to build numbers. Like, I just don't care.
Yeah.
Okay. So I suppose Instagram is the best way.
Yeah.
That's the most popular.
Yeah.
So it's at Colby Management, and yeah, that's it. I don't really use it for anything but to display the guys. I don't really generate number. Like, it's just not.
It's not about followers. It's about.
It's just not something I've ever cared about. I prefer one-on-one attention. Talking to the clients. I don't really direct them to my Instagram unless they specifically ask for it.
Sure. Yeah, I'll say that from experience. You're really good at the chit-chatting on WhatsApp or whatever we use, and that kind of thing really is good that way. So I'm much better in person. I'm much better at talking. I'm not a fan of social media and using that as a way to do business. Sure.
If it happens, I'm not saying I've never gotten jobs from Instagram, because I actually have. Yeah. But it's not something I'm like doing on a regular basis.
Right. It's not the main focus. So fair enough. What kind of in a closing final thought, what are some things that you wanted to share with people that are interested in, whether they're a model now or they're getting in, or maybe they're an agent and they're wanting to have some encouragement? Do you have any kind of final thoughts for people?
Yeah, if you want to get into the industry, like I said, most agents love people who are tenacious and who are communicative. That doesn't mean become a stalker and be weird. It just means follow through when they ask you for something. Yes. When they say, I need images today, do it. When they say, those little things really elevate you in the eyes of the agent and make you more attractive. It has nothing to do with the physicality of you. You're not becoming hotter, but it makes you more attractive when I know I can count on you. Yeah. When I ask you for something and you actually do it, I'm like, okay, this kid taking it seriously. When I ask you to call me, or when I ask you to fill something out, or when I ask you to be somewhere, there's no strife, then I begin to trust you more and more and more and more and more. So you're on my head more. So when clients call, guess who the first couple names out of my mouth are? Yours. Yeah. You know, as opposed to the boy who I can never find, who's flaking all the time. I'm not mentioning your name at all for anything because you're not embarrassing me. So therefore, you're never discussed.
Yeah, just don't come up in that discussion.
You don't come up in the conversations. Photographers email me and call me all the time and ask me random questions about who are the boys I should shoot, who are the boys I should see, who are this and who are that. And I give them a truthful list. Yeah. I'm not going to lie and give them a list of rejects because I need business. Right. Like, I just don't play that.
Credibility too, right? So
I'm giving them the real list because when it doesn't go well, I have a leg to stand on. Like, say, you know, even if I give them someone good and the shoot is a dud, I did my part. But if I give you a dud and then it's a dud, now I've got explaining to do.
Yeah, you're screwed. Yeah.
I don't have time to explain.
No. Yeah.
I don't like explaining myself.
Fair enough. And it's a fast-moving industry, so guys got to kind of stay on top of mind too. That when you're getting a call, you need that stuff now, right? So
I need it now, and if I trust you and I know you're going to give it to me now, then you're the first one that I suggest.
Perfect. Yeah, that's some good advice, man. I appreciate all of those kind of insights and kind of the background on some of that industry, Ryan. Like, not everybody has that experience for so many different aspects of the fashion world, and you know, the transition you made over the time. So really appreciate you coming on and sharing all that. So
you're welcome. Cool. And I can't wait for you to return.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm trying to figure out.
We'll have to discuss that after the holiday.
Yes, yeah,
after Christmas is over.
Get into the new stuff here, but cool. Well, we'll get the end of the recording here now. But thanks for jumping on, and appreciate all your time. So.
Okay, thank you. I'll text you shortly.
Sounds good.